at the scene. It appeared like the motorcycle was pushed off the side of the road into the ditch where it was much harder to see. Mr. Kope's body was a quarter mile away from where the motorcycle was located. So right off the bat, you're thinking, this isn't normal. Why are you a quarter mile away from your motorcycle? Why is your helmet a half a mile at least from where his body was? And why is his cell phone another quarter mile away the opposite direction? It's just one of those things that we can't explain at this point in time.
Robert Kope, 53, lived a life many would dream of. A motorcycle enthusiast, he roamed the scenic backcountry roads of Central and Northern California. He didn't believe in routines, stopping wherever he pleased, whether to fish in a quiet lake or snap some stunning photos of nature to share with loved ones. In early fall 2015, Robert was heading back to his home in San Jose after a short visit to a friend in Oroville, about 3 hours to the north. After filling up his bike in Sonora, a small town just west of Yosemite National Park, Robert cruised down a quiet stretch of highway, completely unaware that this would be the final ride of his life. Somewhere along that lonely road, he would cross paths with a killer who would end his journey.
That day, as I was sitting in the homicide office, we were informed of a possible motorcycle accident with a fatality, and our officers got on scene and determined it was suspicious and called for detectives.
Cory Brown, a detective with the Stanislaus County Sheriff's Department, was used to solving crimes. The department usually dealt with about 20 murders a year, but none would stick with him like the one he was handed on October 7th, 2015.
So the area was on J59, which is a rural highway thoroughfare in the eastern side of Stanislaus County and into Tuolumne County. And on the northwest side of J59 was a motorcycle laying down.
Something didn't sit right about the scene. The motorcycle was gone. That wasn't normal. Then, about a quarter of a mile down the road, Detective Brown spotted police officers huddled off to the side, clearly investigating something.
So I walked to that area and observed a male in full motorcycle riding leathers, almost in a fetal position, up against a barbed wire fence that's probably 8 or 10 feet off the north side of the J59. There was a motorcycle tank bag, like a magnetic bag that would stick to the top of a motorcycle tank. On the shoulder next to him, there were some items strewn about in the grass that looked like they had been removed from the tank bag. The male had a zip tie around his neck. Obviously, that's odd. The zip tie was extremely tight, and then lying in front of the chest area on the grass shoulder in front of him was another zip tie of the same type that was looped in a circle but wasn't attached to anything else.
Lying on the grass near the man's head was a driver's license. It belonged to Robert Kope, a 53-year-old from San Jose, California.
So Mr. Kope's cell phone was found even further to the east along J59 on the opposite side of the road on the south shoulder. My estimate would be another quarter mile down the road is where a cell phone was recovered that was later determined to be his.
At first, there was no sign of Robert's helmet, another oddity. But soon after, a woman stepped forward. She said she had found the helmet on the side of the road. She hadn't seen the body and assumed someone had just discarded the helmet there.
There was no damage to the helmet. There was no damage to the leathers that Mr. Kope was wearing, beyond some minor scrapes, I believe.
There was no sign of struggle, no marks or signs that Robert had fought back against whoever had strangled him to death with a zip tie.
It was tightened down to the point that you weren't going to get a finger underneath it, but with as tight as it went, just physiologically, I think he was probably unconscious within seconds. Like a carotid restraint applied correctly will normally render somebody unconscious within 10 or 15 seconds. A zip tie like that that's cutting off not only the blood, but the air as tight as it was tightened, that's not a normal way somebody commits homicide.
While this mystery slowly unfolded in California, over 2,000 miles away, Robert's older sister, Michelle Silva, had been growing more and more anxious. She hadn't heard from her brother in a while, and then she received an unsettling email from Robert's girlfriend.
To get an email from her was very unusual, and so I opened it. It said, "No matter the time of day, please call me," and it listed her phone number. I called her, and so she said, "Well, I expected him home last night, and he didn't come home. I haven't been able to reach him, and he had several appointments today. And when I spoke to him yesterday, he had said, I will be home. I have these appointments, and I need to get to these appointments." I asked her to file a missing persons report, and I started calling the hospitals and the police stations. In the meantime, with all this going on, I had a call from my husband, who at the time was out of town down in Atlanta. And he asked me if I was sitting down, and I said, "I'm not, but I can be. But I want you to go ahead and tell me." So he said, "Well, I just sent an article to your phone." And it was the article that was in the Modesto Bee about a motorcyclist who had been found on the side of the road. And he said, "I hate to tell you this, but I'm almost certain it's Robert." I got off the phone with him, and I picked it back up, and I dialed the number in the article and left a message for Detective Brown. When Detective Brown called me back, I said, "I'd just rather hear it straight out. Don't try and gloss it over." And so he did say that it was Robert that was dead.
Robert's life had been a bit of a roller coaster. He was just a week away from his 54th birthday when he was murdered. Born and raised in Texarkana, Texas, he joined the Air Force in 1980, where he worked with high-tech aircraft systems. After serving his time and receiving an honorable discharge, he settled in California during the 90s, eventually making a career as a facilities engineer.
He worked hard, but when he was off work, he loved to be tinkering with his motorcycles, riding his motorcycles. I think the motorcycles really gave him a freedom that made him feel at one with nature and the world, that he would just jump on the motorcycle, put one of his fishing poles on the back. He would never take the same route twice and look for parks or lakes that he could stop at along the way and throw the line out, or, on the way to see a buddy or to a bike rally or something like that, and just enjoy the trip.
Robert's love life had been complicated. He had been married once, but the relationship ended after a short time. When he died, he had been in a rocky, on-again, off-again relationship with a woman for a few years.
We were able to determine that Mr. Kope had a girlfriend who he had recently moved in with, who was in the city of San Jose. Very open, very forthcoming, gave us a lot of history on their relationship together, and also allowed us to come to her house without having to obtain a search warrant or anything else. Let us go through Mr. Kope's stuff.
With the help of Robert's girlfriend, Detective Brown worked to piece together the timeline of his last moments. Robert had visited a friend in Oroville, a good 3 hours north of San Jose, but left on October 6th to head home. He stopped for gas around 10 p.m. in Sonora, and just the next morning, he was found dead, only 30 miles away.
He hadn't planned on leaving as early as he did, but he had remembered that he needed to be back in the San Jose area for a job interview. the next day. So he would be traveling home that night when that wasn't originally the plans on the day that he was going to return. She had informed me that he doesn't plan his routes, but he usually traveled back roads. He didn't like traveling the highways on his motorcycle. So he would take the back roads as often as he could.
Detective Brown dug deeper into Robert's life, trying to find any clue or lead that might explain how this bizarre crime had happened.
Looking into Mr. Kope's background, I found that he was retired from the tech industry. He had a very good career. He was still doing consulting and side projects. No indication of any issues with alcohol, even though there was alcohol in his system that night. No drug use, gangs, gambling debts, none of the stuff that we would normally associate with risk activity. Nothing going on in his personal life at that time that would lead me to believe he was at risk to be murdered by somebody that he was having regular involvement with.
The evidence at the crime scene didn't provide much. There were no fingerprints or DNA left on the zip ties, and the ground was too wet to lift any prints. But then, something about Robert's past caught Brown's eye. 5 years earlier, Robert had been engaged to a woman who had tragically died by suicide in an incredibly strange way. She had suffocated herself using plastic zip ties.
So when I found out about the former fiancé being found 5 years prior in San Jose, deceased with zip ties around the neck, it's not a common method of homicide. It's not a common method of suicide. She was partially off of a bed. Now, the zip ties around her neck were very thin, home use type zip ties that had been strung together to make them long enough to go around her neck. And the tag ends for those zip ties were one on either side of the neck at the front. So it would have been very easy for somebody to grab those by themselves and just pull, and then they would have tightened up and would have been very difficult to remove without being cut. I find it a very incredible coincidence that two people associated with each other both died within what's relatively a few short years of each other, both cause of death being zip tie around the neck.
My brother had been out with her the night before, and he called me after she had been found, and it's the first time I had heard him be emotional. And he blamed himself because he'd been out with her the night before. He said, we had a great dinner, we laughed, we talked. You know, I dropped her off, and when I said, hey, I have an early day, she was like, that's fine, we'll see each other in a day or two. And there was nothing he said that seemed amiss.
The woman hadn't left behind any notes, but she had battled depression, and her autopsy report listed her death as a suicide.
He had explained that he was, I guess, a suspect because he had been the last person to see her, and he understood why. You know, he was happy once he was ruled out as a suspect, but he was initially not ruled out by the family. They were very upset. So he was upset that they were contacting him in a negative manner.
Could it be that someone blamed Robert for his fiancée's death and decided to take revenge using the same weapon, a zip tie, to kill him?
When Robert was found dead, and he was found a homicide committed in the same fashion that his previous girlfriend had been labeled as a suicide, of course, your mind starts running away and say, is this retaliation some years later?
There's a possibility that the fiancé whose death was ruled a suicide by zip ties, that her family may have held Kope responsible. Those statements were made to me by some people. The problem we run into is Mr. Kope didn't plan any of his routes, and he didn't take the same route twice. He didn't go in a consistent manner where you would be able to lie in wait and intercept him. And he wasn't planning on coming home that night. So even if somebody was trying to plan out his route or catch him on a way, the only person that we have any knowledge of that would have known he was actually leaving is the male friend that he was staying with and his girlfriend, who he texted that he forgot about an appointment, so he was coming home.
Detective Brown starts to wonder if there might be a darker, more personal explanation behind Robert's death. Could it be that Robert actually took his own life? Did he somehow copy the tragic way his former fiancée had died, using the same zip tie on himself?
We went through Mr. Kope's garage. We went through his toolbox. We went through everything we could find in an attempt to locate any zip ties consistent with the ones that were located at the scene, to see if we could even say that he had those with him, that it either would push one way or the other towards suicide or not, or if it was a crime of opportunity and those happened to be with him already, and we were unable to locate anything that would match those type of zip ties. The coroner didn't feel it would physically be possible for Mr. Kope to have placed the zip tie around his neck in the manner and positioning that it was. There were items that I believe were missing from Mr. Kope's personal belongings that should have been there to indicate that at least somebody else had come by, and if they came across somebody who had committed suicide and weren't involved in anything, makes me wonder why they wouldn't report something like that. During the performance of the autopsy, which I believe was the next day, the coroner indicated that Mr. Kope had received several broken ribs on his right-hand side, consistent with a minor motorcycle accident that appeared his motorcycle may have been involved with. I know people's ribs can be broken by an assault, either being punched very hard and or kicked. There was no indication on his leathers or his hands or his face that any assault like that had taken place, unless that's the only thing they did when they assaulted him. There obviously was a level of control, either with Mr. Kope being unconscious for a reason we don't know, whether he was rendered unconscious or was unconscious when the person found him, or they were able to exert enough control over him through fear or a weapon that they were able to place a zip tie around his neck without there being any indication on his body of an extreme struggle. So there would be some criminal sophistication and or experience there.
For years, Robert's sister, Michelle Silva, had racked her brain, trying to recall any conversations or odd moments that might give her a clue about who could want to hurt her brother.
My brother had a previous girlfriend that it was on again, off again.
One memory stands out. Michelle recalls Robert mentioning that one of his ex-girlfriends had started to act like a stalker. After he moved on and began seeing someone else, she would show up uninvited at places they went, at events they attended. And even more strangely, when Robert's funeral took place, this ex-girlfriend, someone who hadn't been in his life for years, showed up unannounced.
Never underestimate a woman scorned, and that's what I feel. If a woman scorned gets it in her mind, I believe they can do anything they want to do. My realistic brain says that's stupid, and that would take too much effort on somebody's part. She'd really have to be pissed at somebody to do this, but I don't know.
As part of his investigation, Detective Brown speaks to anyone who might have been driving on Highway J59 at the time of Robert's death. One witness, a young man, recalls stopping at a market in LaGrange the morning after Robert was believed to have been killed. The man reported seeing signs of a motorcycle accident on J59.
That person exited the store and left, in my recollection, a slightly lifted truck, and left going east out of the city of LaGrange. We were able to obtain video from the inside of the LaGrange market of this male coming in. We ended up releasing that video footage to local media and got several responses on people who they believed the male in the video to be. And I made several attempts to contact this male. It took quite a bit of time, but he finally got him on the phone and he agreed to meet me in the city of LaGrange for an interview. I asked him about that morning. He made some statements to me that he was driving from, I believe it was his dad's house, but he had passed by and seen Mr. Kope's body on the side of the road. Told me he didn't have a cell phone, so he had driven to the market and told him about the accident, and then he left. He'd also made the statement to me that he was driving his personal car and that he was by himself. I didn't feel that everything he was telling me was obviously correct by what we had viewed on the video.
The witness's account grows even more bizarre when the security footage reveals something strange. The man can be seen climbing into the passenger side of a lifted white truck, which then drives off.
I couldn't get him to change his statement or come up with a reason why he was being either evasive or just flat out lying to me. So I attempted to set up another date in the future, and after that point in time, he didn't show for that appointment, and I was never able to track him down again. His actions that morning were odd. I don't believe he was 100% truthful with me that he didn't have a cell phone or that he wanted to identify who he was with at that point in time. He's definitely a person of interest that needs to be spoken to again, but from his own statement at the market, we know at least he passed by the area. Now, whether he rummaged through the items that were there on the scene and took stuff, and that's why he's being evasive, or did something else at the scene that we're unaware of, that's what needs to be discussed further with him.
The witness, however, leaves no contact details and vanishes soon after, making it impossible for police to follow up. But as the investigation continues, Detective Brown uncovers another unsettling connection between a motorcycle, a lifted white truck, and the missing witness.
When we had put the video out and initially put the story out about what had occurred out on J59, I received a phone call from a male who lives in the city of Snelling to the south of Stanislaus County and just slightly to the south of LaGrange. This male also rides motorcycles. He rides motorcycles in that area. A couple months prior to this, he told me that he was riding down Snelling Road and was what he believes intentionally run off the road by a lifted white truck. And then he turned around and actually started chasing this white truck, and it went up J59 towards LaGrange. He went after it for a little while on his motorcycle and said he finally got the realization that he's by himself, he's unarmed, and he doesn't know who's in the truck. So he stopped following it. He never got a license plate of the vehicle that ran him off the roadway. This was interesting to me for several reasons: that he believes it was done intentionally, and a lifted white truck could be consistent with the lighting color lifted truck that dropped the male off who reported Mr. Kope's body on the side of J59 at the LaGrange Market.
In 2021, Detective Brown retired. By that time, the mysterious witness and the lifted white truck had become the strongest leads in the case, and they remain the most significant clues to this day.
Out of the homicides that I've worked, Mr. Kope's case is frustrating because of the complete lack of physical evidence to give us any leads. It's just frustrating. The best theory that makes sense to me is Mr. Kope got some gas, that he was traveling J59 trying to get home. I believe the front tire on his motorcycle was low, which, if there was a truck out there with somebody trying to take opportunities with motorcycle riders, probably if they tried to run him off the road, it would have been much harder for him to maneuver and he could have caused a minor crash. How he was overpowered and a zip tie placed around his neck, I wish I had a theory for that. I don't.
For Michelle, watching the investigation stall and understanding the detective's frustration with the case is tough, but it's the personal loss that weighs most heavily on her.
How many times can you call a family member and say, gosh, I'm sorry, I can't tell you anything. We have no new evidence. We have no new leads. We have no information, and we still cannot share anything else because it's an open and active case. It's got to be difficult on their end to make that call and say, there's no news to share.
One of the hardest moments for Michelle was when she had to break the news to her parents. She had to tell them that their only son, Robert, had been murdered. She can still vividly remember walking into their house where her father greeted her, completely unaware of what had happened.
He said, "Oh, okay, come on in. Your mom's not awake yet." And I said, "Well, it's something important and we really need to talk." So I went in and helped my dad get my mom up. It's difficult for her, and at that time, the dementia had also started setting in. So I helped get her up, and I helped get her changed for the morning, and I sat them down, and I held both their hands. I said, "I'm very sorry. I have some bad news. Robert has passed away." My dad, he lost all color in his face. And I was certain he was going to pass away himself at that moment because his body went limp and he squeezed my hand so tight it hurt. But my mother, in her own world, said, "It's okay. Robert is here with us and he's going to take care of me." A moment later, my dad looked up and he gave my hand another squeeze. And he said, "This was God's will and we have no control." I wish I could be like my dad and say, "This is what God has decided and I can accept this, but maybe I'm too curious and maybe this is wrong." But I would really like to know. I don't like that it's unsolved.